Welcome to another edition of Front Porch Politics, the show that brings politics back into our communities. I'm Tim Boyum. This month, we are entirely focused on the issue of tolls. Specifically, should there be tolls on all ferries here on the coast of North Carolina? The residents here say, no way. But there are some west of here who are paying tolls on highways that say it may be time. It's August, nearly 90 degrees already, and the sun's just beginning to show its face. As the sticky salt-filled summer air lingers, a morning routine begins. You don't see it like pavement, but the folks who use the ferries are quick to remind you exactly what it is.
It's a highway, it's our road, it's our street. It's the only way vehicles can access the island.
Since 1973, when this was established, we've been paying highway taxes. This is our highway.
You know, the ferry service to Ocracoke is our lifeblood.
But as tolls rise above paved roads, a push to pull the wet highway as well.
Just the fairness of why one community gets to ride for free and the other community doesn't is a real big issue for me. This
summer, from the coast to the legislature and west, a budget debate played out, reaching the most powerful politicians in the state.
Ken Heath from Hamilton County.
Hey, Ken.
A debate that's far from new and far from over.
We're on the, what we call the cherry branch side of the ferry.
On a morning like this, it's easy to be lulled into the idea the ferry is a leisurely ride full of tourists. Some are, but clearly many are not.
They're going back and forth to work. Painters, plumbers, construction workers, people going to the base to work, people getting off the base, having worked all night.
A school bus caught our eye, and moments later, the ferry terminal transformed into a bus stop. Then minutes later, that bus crawls onto the ferry like any other car.
These students are coming from, Beaufort, Carteret, Craven on this side, Havelock area, and they need this ferry to stay no charge.
Ken Heath's passionate about the ferry, not just as a random rider, but as the mayor of nearby Arapahoe. The state's ferry system was born in 1947, a way to connect the Outer Banks and river communities to the mainland. There are now 7 routes built up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, making it the second largest system behind Washington. 4 of the ferry routes are completely free. 3 routes charge as little as $1 for a passenger and as high as $45 for vehicles, depending on length. The 3 tolled routes are often filled with tourists around Ocracoke and Southport. A 2020 study by NC State for the Department of Transportation showed it had a $735 million economic impact, with 2 million passengers and 800,000 vehicles a year on average. That study also showed ridership was not as tourism-based as you might think. 5 of the 7 routes had at least 40% of riders using it for work, school, or errands, with nearly 2/3 in areas like Cherry Branch and Minnesota Beach. Even on the routes to Ocracoke, at least 1 in 4 was using it for work, school, or errands. Several of the routes technically have paved alternatives, but there is one place where the only other alternative is a plane, a place where tourists are vital to its livelihood.
Ocracoke is unique. Of course, it's an island, only accessible by ferry.
On the southern tip of the Outer Banks,
You can ride your bike, you can walk everywhere. It's charming, it's small.
the tiny island of Ocracoke.
It's kind of like Mayberry by the sea.
Some 800 people call this 16 miles of island beach home, a place where Blackbeard was killed in 1718. Centuries later, ferries rule the waters, and an old fishing village has found a new life.
It's become a tourist industry here.
As the Hatteras Ferry arrives, visitors first see an Ocracoke institution.
We're the first business as you come in from the Hatteras Ferry on the right.
The plates on the wall prove how important tourists are to filling plates on the tables. A pub that understands the window to make money is short and sweet, largely just June to August.
Many work 6-7 days a week because they know a storm could come, we're closed in the winter, and that's the trade-off. It's not for everybody. It takes a lot of oomph.
On the other end of the island, Bob Chestnut waits for a passenger ferry to fill his store.
Been on the beach all week. It's been hot, it's been sunny. They've had a little too much sun, so let's take a day and go visit somewhere. They go to Manio, they go to Ocracoke. for the day, a day tripper.
Chestnut can look at ferry cameras and practically predict the future.
It was slow in here until about 1 o'clock. And I looked again at about noon, 6 full lines at the ferry, really backed up. And then now, a couple hours later, here they all are.
As I say, your needs and your wants are different. It used to be you'd go to the grocery store and say, instead of saying, I want this for dinner, it's, oh, let's see what they have for dinner. You certainly don't need any fancy clothes. You don't need fancy cars. You don't need a fancy bike.
Hyde County is one of the poorest counties in the state, a challenge they fear could get worse if a state senator gets her way.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult is it to fund transportation in the state?
In a Mooresville coffee shop, a cup of coffee with State Senator Vicky Sawyer to chat about a big, complicated challenge. She's a key transportation budget writer in the legislature and faces a tough task with a sinking gas tax that accounts for half of all road funding.
Which has been an amazing friend for a long time, but that friend is eventually going to go away, and that's something that keeps me up at night.
Senator Sawyer lives and represents a fast-growing area north of Charlotte.
So I-77 is basically an interstate, right, that does run through the heart of North Carolina, but it's also like our front porch. When you live around Lake Norman, there's not many ways to get north and south, and Charlotte being the major area, where a lot of people who live in our area actually work in Charlotte. So getting down 77 is your front driveway. For years, your front driveway was clogged.
Without funding to build new lanes, it was toll lanes or no lanes. And toll lanes were added and opened in 2019. But the folks who live along 77, including Senator Sawyer, were not happy.
Remember, there's I-85 just next door in Cabarrus County that had been redone and refinished and has free, beautiful lanes that go from Charlotte to Raleigh. So here we are in our community, paying the same taxes, doing the same work, being the same good stewards as we should be of our resources. And yet, when it's time for our interstate to get widened, we're charged for that.
In June, while the legislature was largely out, we followed Arapahoe Mayor Ken Heath, who made the drive to talk to anyone who would listen.
It's so important that you're here even when it's not a full session.
Oh yeah, if we can just if you can contact just 2 or 3 people that are in the Senate, then they'll spread the word throughout the Senate. Ken Heath from Pamlico County.
Hey, Ken.
It just happens one of the 2 senators here this day, arguably the most powerful politician in the state, Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger.
Just expressing my concerns about the ferry tolls in that county, and just trying to get up here. I know he's held in session, but I wanted to come up anyway and talk to Senator Ford and talk to you and just say, hey, it's mostly a commuter ferry, it's a workforce ferry, and we consider it, a tax on the working man there in Pamlico County.
Yeah, so I know there are conversations taking place.
Right.
And I know Senator Sanderson has been a huge advocate for the position that the folks in Pamlico County have taken on that, and Senator Hannig as well. So
yes, they have.
We are having those conversations. It'll be resolved once we can get things resolved as far as the budget is concerned.
The next day, I got a message from the mayor. He heard the tolls were indeed removed from the budget. Days later in Mooresville, Senator Sawyer confirmed she texted a coastal Republican senator to the news that exact same day.
I texted him and said, Senator Hannig, you can tell those guys you beat up on this mean Charlotte Republican because the tolls will not be in the budget. And he laughed and giggled, and that's the way it should be, right? I mean, everybody on a different team, but at the end of the day, we all work together.
The debate over tolling all ferries has been a battle for at least a decade.
They'll look somewhere else to help balance the budget. This is not the place to do it by charging people to go to work.
For now, the coast has won the battle, but for how long? As a construction conundrum creates challenges across North Carolina, it sure seems inevitable. But if I've learned one thing covering politics for 2 decades in this state, you never know.